All good crime cases start with a 911 call, and this case is no exception. We have 911 audio and body cam footage of a home invasion that led to a chase in Illinois, and it eventually led to a harrowing situation for the officers that were involved. With the gruesome discovery back at the original scene, it stands to reason that sometimes the good guys win, but it doesn't always mean there's cause for celebration. All that and what it means for your weekend on the Comm Center.
Wake up, America. It's the Comm Center with Drew Breezy. It's a TV show on the internet about two best friends who are called by a small town sheriff to investigate after his wife claims to have created a cake recipe that can only ever be attempted one time. I'm John. I'm an actual 911 dispatcher. Joining me as always is Drew Breezy. He's a police detective with something like 30 years of experience. I've almost got 10 in, so between the two of us, we've been fighting crime for a long time. Drew, how have you been in the last week since I've seen you?
I've been great. The secret recipe for that cake, by the way, was not only Dr. Pepper, but actual pepper.
You know, I know a lot of people who do cook with Dr. Pepper and Pepsi, and they put it in the roasts and things like that, and make the glaze for meatballs in it, and it's pretty good. Do you guys have any Baxter family recipes that you guys hand down from generation to generation?
Yeah, meth.
I meant more like for Thanksgiving, though.
Oh. Listen, my mother makes the greatest meal.
I love the idea of all the Baxters getting together and doing meth and just having a rager for Thanksgiving.
My God rest her soul, my mother used to make this meal for me. This is my favorite meal I would have when I went home. She was the head cook for a nutritional program for the elderly at our church for most of my childhood, a good chunk of my childhood anyway, before she moved on to Buffalo City Court. She used to work in Buffalo City Court. But anyway, she used to make this meal for us as a family, like on big occasions. You know, casseroles are big there. So she made this rice, broccoli, cheese casserole. I think it had Cheese Whiz in it even. Look, my mother was all about natural ingredients, but also she was about the flavor of, Caucasian people. And she also, the main course in that meal is a Parmesan crusted, chicken fillets, breasts, chicken breasts. And what else? Oh, the mashed potatoes that she would make with the sour cream already in them. So it was a mashed potato / cream cheese / sour cream concoction out of this world. Probably the greatest meal ever made. I'll never get to experience it done by her hand again, but they were always made with love. Listen, in that fictional book that I keep talking I'm going to write, I just haven't assembled stuff yet, and believe me, it's an albatross. It's hanging over my slumped shoulders, but I still assert that nobody, and I mean nobody, makes a sandwich like your mother makes. It could be the worst sandwich in the world, and it could be made with cat food and just look like peanut butter and jelly thrown at two pieces of bread. But for some reason, it always tastes better when your mom makes it. So I don't know if that's your experience. That's my experience. So I'm gathering that's not your experience, for which I apologize.
No. I think you were closer talking about my childhood when you mentioned something about cat food. That's what I was. That's when your talk about how loving your mother was. That's what I could relate the most. My mom, she would cook, I guess, for Thanksgiving, but it was never anything special. It was never anything that you could tell had been passed down through the generations. She just put lots of butter and garlic salt in everything. Which as there's probably people who are listening who are like, what's wrong with you? Butter and garlic are the best things ever. But my mother is proof that you can do anything to the point where it's not tasty anymore. So I don't have any good recipe memories from her, but my grandfather made oyster stuffing, which is not complicated. It's stuffing with canned oysters in it. And then so there's something about it that's whenever I have that on Thanksgiving, it always kind of reminds me of the good times.
For some reason, I would think that Old Bay seasoning would be prevalent in your home? Just based on
Because I am not good at keeping track of things, and because I love Old Bay, I have like 3 different
Old Bays.
containers of Old Bay. That's correct.
So just to wrap this up with a tidy little bow, our family recipe, we would get together and make cat food.
Cat food, but with a little bit of Old Bay. It's not as bad as you think. Folks, if you have a recipe, go ahead and leave it at 848-COM-911. That's 848-266-6911. Try to get that to me before Thanksgiving so that I can actually make it this year. If you have an old-fashioned family recipe that you want to give us, that would be fine. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit like. Make sure you hit subscribe. Also, it's very important to go ahead and leave a comment with your favorite recipe below. If there's some way that you can incorporate cat food into a meaningful recipe, I would love to hear that. If you're listening on Apple, stop whatever it is you're doing, leave a 5-star rating and review. Those things really help us out. On Spotify, leave a 5-star rating. That's the best you could do over there. They'll try to save you time. It's helpful to us as well. If you are on social media, you could find us mostly on Instagram. That's where we mostly get down. Drew, I don't know. I don't know if he's on meth today or what. He's very animated. But you can also find us on X someday when the algorithm finally gets sick of us and takes us down. You can find us there. You can also find us on Facebook. So make sure that you go over there and do that as well. And also, just as a reminder, we are still banned on TikTok. So you cannot find us on TikTok. Drew, this case, you said it's out of Illinois. I think when I first saw it, it said Plano, so I assumed Texas, but this is from Illinois.
So did I. I assumed that because it said Plano. We have questions over the uniforms, first of all, but it's definitely Illinois. So do you want to get right into it?
Yeah, why don't we get in there? And I know that there's the 2 cops with from different departments, but identical, with the same tailor. I know that they'll come on and start introducing the case, or we can get into the 911 audio, either one.
Well, we're going to do both.
I'm Chief Norm Allison of the Plano Police Department.
And I'm Bobby Richardson, the Undersheriff with the Kendall County Sheriff's Office.
This debrief will present audio and video from the 911 call, body-worn cameras, and dash cameras to explain what occurred. Any loss of life is tragic, but it is especially tragic when it occurs because of senseless acts. This incident resulted in the loss of 2 lives, and our hearts are with the family and friends who must live with this loss.
911, what's the location emergency?
Yes, pretty sure I just got robbed today. Some of my guns are missing and everything.
Okay. And what is...
Am I allowed to just jump in here with commentary right away?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, okay, first of all, as a 911 dispatcher, this is not at all uncommon. People will call us and say that they've been robbed. I've discussed this a million times on the show. What he means is that he's been burgled, or so we think. And this is the one time where, as a 911 dispatcher, well, I don't want to spoil anything, but he calls to say that somebody has broken into his house and someone's taken something. This would technically be a burglary, but this is a very, very, very routine call as discovery of burglary after the fact. Drew?
Theft with force is a robbery, meaning there has to be an interaction between human beings. If someone comes into your home when you're not there, that's considered a burglary, or what some people call breaking and entering, or B&E, or whatever.
Coercion also there, yeah. Force or coercion.
For what theft with some form of violence between 2 people, that's a robbery. We see that this actually turns into a robbery at some point. So go ahead.
Spoilers. Here we go.
What is your address?
It's Pratt Court, Plano, Illinois.
Okay. And do you have like signs of forced entry in your home?
Yeah, I just noticed it right now.
Now, this is unusual too. Well, no, it's a usual question, but when you're trying to figure out if this has been a burglary, you're going to ask that question. There's already sign on forced entry. But Drew, just as a detective, what did signs of forced entry tell you about a burglary?
Try to determine the entry method to figure out if it's serial or not. Like if you're the responding patrol officer, you're just going to do the latent investigation of what's in front of you. But you want to document these details, like they came in through the back sliding glass door by taking it off its track or whatever, because eventually when it lands into a latent detective's area, they can start putting the pieces together to see if that's the same person doing the same thing. If they can determine if there's a MO, and it makes it a lot easier to solve it, because once you solve one, you can then backtrack and solve all the rest. So details like that are important, like the method of entry coming in through the window. I mean, you got to make sure that the glass is on the inside and stuff like that. Otherwise, sometimes people, stage these burglaries and the glass will be on the outside. You got to use your judgment, because.
And what if there is no signs of forced entry? What might that tell you?
Could be a domestic situation. It could be a situation where they know each other. It could be a complete civil matter. I worked a burglary. I spent most of my day on a burglary one time where a guy, he owned a big glass company here in Florida, and he swore up and down that somebody got into his safe, took his money, and took all of his important documents, and that was the only thing they got. Or maybe a surveillance system or something. And then by the end of the day, they were holding an intervention at his home for him, and his wife was telling him that they were divorcing and that he needed to go to rehab.
I need to hear that entire case breakdown at some point.
All right, how many of them are missing?
That I don't know yet because I didn't take inventory, but I know a shotgun is missing.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna go ahead and have our officer.
Hey!
Hello?
So if I'm taking this call and I'm hearing about a report of a gun stolen, and it's a burglary, and the guy was fairly relaxed up to this point, and all of a sudden he starts screaming, it's an ambush with a weapon involved. My level of tension is going to go through the roof, Drew.
It's an awful thing for the dispatcher to have to hear, and this is what I keep saying. These are the organic sounds that come through somebody's headset that they have no control over, but they have to hear. They're the first witnesses to this crime, right? You being a 911 operator, John, like you're the first witness in this thing. And that poor dispatcher that had to hear that, now she's in a helpless situation because she can't reach through the phone and help the guy. She doesn't know what happened. She doesn't know if he just fell down the stairs or if he was confronted by somebody with one of his own shotguns. So these are the things that will accelerate your lifespan by exponentially, we'll call it.
Puts miles on, that's for sure.
Puts miles on.
Hello? 911, what is the address to your emergency?
Crack Court. Somebody next door to me sound like a gunshot. Please come.
Okay, so shots fired.
That's what it sounded like.
Okay.
But his window was just busted, like somebody shot through his window, and I just heard him. It was please hurry.
I know, we've got help coming, okay? 601 and 611.
Anytime you get corroboration from nearby, that's how you know that something terrible has just happened. A lot of times we'll take phone calls of things going on, and those calls can be misleading, or we're not getting the entire truth of what's happening. But once you start getting phone calls from the neighborhood that shots are fired, that rapidly escalates your response. I could tell you probably about a dozen stories like that, Drew.
Yeah, the hair on the back of your neck will stand up. It's eerie. When I was sitting at my my office was right in the communication center itself when I was, running the communication center. But also when I was a 911 dispatcher, we had essentially what other people would use as a fire alarm, like it had a strobe and it had a certain tone to it. And that was an indicator that all of we're being flooded with 911 calls, and it signaled everybody else who's not doing anything to log into 911 to start taking some of these calls so we can maintain the standards of, answering 90% of the calls within 10 seconds or less. So, just like you say, if you're on the call, if you're on the phone and you hear, hey, there's somebody that's about to rob a 7-Eleven, they're wearing masks and they're holding shotguns, and then all of a sudden you start hearing that tone in the background and you see the strobe, that other people are driving by watching stuff go down. It's the same with like a car accident, but these again are more organic noises that this dispatcher is having to hear, putting extra pressure on them, trying to get the information in and keep it straight to get it to the radio dispatcher, to get it to the officers on the street. And once again, shows these are first responders. These are the people that are getting the raw information and processing it before it even makes it to the people that are going to respond.
Speaking of radio response,
Assignment.
611.
It's going to be a possible home invasion. Pratt. Caller said there were signs of forced entry, and there were 32s missing from the closet. Our call taker did hear what sounded like one shot. We're also getting another caller in the area.
10-4.
those tones are so everyone pays attention to the following super important broadcast. And if you're just listening, a 1032 is a firearm there in Plano.
P3 units, Plano is going to be responding to a home invasion with shots fired in the area of Pratt. P3 units, be advised, Plano is responding. Home invasion with shots fired in Pratt Court.
You may tell that the dispatchers there are very relaxed about it. That is our job. It is not our job to sound very uptight or scared when we're on the radio. A lot of times I've seen in the news media where it's like, oh, the dispatchers don't even sound like they care. Well, first of all, emergencies are our bread and butter. We deal with this stuff all the time. So we're not phased at all. And that's great, because when you're going through the worst day of your life, you want someone to respond over the phone and the radio who's not phased. And we also want to sound professional. And if the police officers responding, they know that they're going into a dangerous or bad situation. They all just dropped their donuts right into their coffee and said, holy shit, and threw the car into gear. But when it comes to stuff that's going to be on the radio, they want a calming voice. And also when all this stuff inevitably winds up in front of a jury or in the news media or on the comm center with Drew Breezy, they want to put forward a professional sounding, non-emotional radio dispatch. Drew?
There was something scientific to that back in the 90s. I think that the United States Air Force used a calming female voice for in fighter jets to determine, like, altitude too low. Like,
they still do that. Yeah, you'll hear
Yeah.
terrain, pull up.
yeah,
Please,
yeah,
buddy.
and it's usually a very calm female voice. It's it could be a calm male voice, I guess, now, but the study showed back then that it was. I guess more calming, or more it centered the pilots more to hear that in their ear.
That's what we're emulating. Here we go with actual body cam.
Can I tell you something also, John, from the officer standpoint here?
Absolutely. That's what you're here for.
This is me in a sense. Now, I'm not bragging, because it used to drive people insane, but I always had the knack of being in the right place at the right time, or in the wrong place at the right time.
You're ship magnet. We
Depending.
get it. Yeah.
It was so. Listen, I am not bragging. I can tell you right now, I've declared on this podcast that north is where the clouds are. I have no sense of direction whatsoever. For some reason, I was always just 10 seconds away. I don't know how it works. I don't know. I don't know if someone up above was trying to get me injured, and the people that were involved just weren't good. But by the grace of God, I survived everything. But I was usually like Johnny on the spot, first one on the scene, pulling up, hearing the sirens in the distance, knowing, okay, everything's gonna be fine because people are coming. They can either give me help, or they can help me if I'm fighting somebody. And that's exactly what this officer found himself into. You're going to see in a second here.
601 garage door just opened. Vehicle started in the garage. Hey, please stop! 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 Got a 28 Edward Bravo, Edward Boy 20606, 20606. Stop!
Pretty good indicator that something very bad has happened there, because the police officer was approaching them, telling them to stop. They obviously ignored everything that the police officer said, but it wasn't a matter of, well, I was just pulling out of my car and on my phone and distracted, because they kind of drove on the grass to get away. They didn't drive
Yeah.
at the officer.
That
But
that was a clear indicator, the way it was definitely a getaway, right?
Yeah, it's a getaway. Right. He's in a getaway car, John.
Did you see that it's a Bronco?
I did. I did. It's a green Bronco, though. It says the officer attempts to stop the car, but the driver refuses to stop, and a pursuit is initiated. You know, I'm kind of anti-pursuit, but there are always exceptions, especially in forcible felonies and in a case where we know that there are weapons involved and we don't know if we're able to identify the person behind the wheel. And that was, by the way, if you're watching, a good visual example of why, because they're doing a high-speed pursuit through a school zone where the light is flashing 25 miles an hour is the speed limit.
Fines might be doubled there.
Income 721, we got a male down, gunshot wound. Roll medics to the house, please.
All right, John, you want to comment on that?
Another officer got onto the scene and found that Mr. Novak, our original reporting party, who called in to say the burglar, that there had been a burglar in his house, had been shot. He's been shot with a gunshot wound, and might as well just get the spoilers out of the way now to help contextualize everything that's happening. But he's been murdered. And so now police officers in pursuit are definitely chasing our prime murder suspect. We saw him leave the scene. Police officers literally saw him drive out of that residence, fleeing the crime scene. The evidence is coming together very clearly that this is our primary person. So him having just murdered someone and being in that agitated psychological state, he's a very dangerous person to everyone else around him, Drew. And I think this is maybe one of those occasions where even agencies with a limited pursuit policy are definitely going to pursue here. Go ahead.
Yeah. And we're starting and stopping. Just remember, all of this happens in real time, and this officer's adrenaline is flowing, which is causing his heart to beat and his mouth to go dry and all these other things, because he's trying to keep his head clear as to you can only, first of all, in a pursuit itself, you can really only drive to 80% of your abilities. You got to leave 20% for error and for the driver in front of you to make an error. Okay, so you've got that. Then on top of that, that 20% is probably still swirling around with the fact that you just learned, yeah, this is definitely something. This is what we thought was a robbery is now a homicide. So I'm chasing a homicide suspect here who obviously has already killed once. He's probably not going to have anything to lose once I stop him. So you really, really have to maintain focus. And so,
Right. That's the most dangerous part, is that he knows that if he gets caught, that's the end of his life either way. Either he's going to prison for life, or I'm assuming Illinois doesn't have the death penalty, but it's the end of the road for him when these police get him. So he may have a I won't be taken alive mentality when they get there.
Still down, gunshot wound, rolling medics to the residence.
We're still eastbound 34. We're approaching Bristol Ridge Road. Speeds are going to be 55 miles per hour. Subjects possibly armed and dangerous due to the home invasion. Unknown occupants.
As the pursuit approached Eola Road in Aurora, the car went south on Eola Road and U-turned back at Keating Drive, heading back towards Route 34. At Eola Road in Route 34, the car entered the left turn lane. So now it's displaying kind of erratic behavior. It's unedited in real time. Here we go.
By the way, this guy just jumped out of the Bronco. He's pointing a firearm at the police officers. And as you just heard from those wonderful laser sounds, he's now firing at the officers. Like I said, I'll never be taken alive mentality. There are cars on either side of him. These are people who are just coming and going from work, from daycare. This is a target dense environment, and he is opening fire. He does not care who lives and dies in this situation. And for those of you who don't like officer-involved shootings, you don't like uses of force, this guy is in control of the situation, and he's forcing the issue, and he's forfeiting his own life. By putting all these other people in danger, by putting the officers in danger, he's making it so that the police officers have no other alternative but to take control of the situation with alternative force, which means there's no negotiating with him. There's no talking it out. Once he starts opening fire, you can give commands to get down on the ground, but he's already shooting. It's time to just shoot back. And as the old saying goes, when it's time to talk, talk. And when it's time to shoot, shoot.
Okay, our faces are partially obscuring his face. We took out the for intentionally, and we also took out the gunshots because YouTube doesn't like that either. Although this came from an official government video with gunshots in it.
Well, they're not monetized, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's true. After observing the subject wielding the shotgun, one Plano officer and one Kendall County deputy discharged their firearms, striking the subject. There he is, pointing. He's getting out of the car with the shotgun, ready to go. He points the weapon at the Plano officer, takes a couple steps. He fired the gun, and now he's pointing the weapon at the Kendall deputy. It says deputies and officers on scene utilized a shield to approach and secure the subject and then begin rendering medical aid approximately 1 minute after the time of the shooting. So they gave it time to see what else was going to happen in that car to make sure that nobody else is going to jump out. They probably had to gather a shield or have a shield arrive because the guy is still laying next to a shotgun. And their job and their duty at that point is to get up there and render aid. I understand, but we have to do it safely to make sure that we don't create any more victims. So if he picks up the gun again, we can, from a distance, handle that so he doesn't take out any other civilians. But as far as us going up to secure him, it's probably wise to wait for the shield and then render the aid we need to render. And you can see that people from both agencies are rendering. Somebody grabs a hold of the shotgun. They clear the car to make sure that it's secure, make sure that there's nobody else hiding in there or any other victims. And they rush the victim to the hospital. I call him the victim. They rush the suspect to the hospital, but he was deceased. Because the officer involved shooting took care in the DuPage County portion of Aurora, the findings of the Illinois State Police investigation will be reviewed by the DuPage County State Attorney's Office. Think of this: the chief and the deputy chief that were on there earlier both said, "Look, we didn't want any signs of impropriety here, so we turned this whole thing over to the Illinois State Police," and that's who was investigating this.
Very common.
Very common. The individuals involved in this incident were known to one another. It wasn't a random act. So take from that what you will. But that's the conclusion of the debrief, John.
You know, things like this, I'm not at all surprised when I saw that and I heard that this was not a random act. If you think about it, a lot of times with gun thefts from homes, that's from people who will know that those firearms are there. Firearms are very valuable, knowing where to go get them, how to get them out of a safe if they're secured. A lot of times a weapon taken from a home is by someone that knows that it's there, that knows that the burglary is worth the payoff. Also, just the shooting and the flight, you know, I'm not at all surprised to find out that these guys maybe had some kind of a beef with each other. Could have been even a civil issue. Could have literally been over dispute over ownership of the firearms. Of course, it could have been any number of other issues, interpersonal drama. It could have just been that because the burglar was interrupted, that the burglar didn't know what else to do, and he fired those shots. So it's very, very unfortunate. I feel bad for Mr. Novak, who came home one day and found out that his house had been burglarized, and then he was shot. We do the best we can in those situations, but police officers and medics and EMTs, firefighters, there's only so much we can do to answer 911 calls for violence and things like that. And I feel bad for the 911 dispatcher who had to take the call and may have heard the shot in which Mr. Novak was fatally wounded. I'm one of many dispatchers who carries that inside of me, where I have talked to someone who has died while they are on the phone with me. We talked about that earlier, being one of those things that causes high mileage. On the Monday show, I covered a case where a little girl was taken hostage by her own father, and she was overheard on the phone pleading to not go to heaven today. And the
Oh.
dispatcher said that it's calls like these that add up over time and you carry with you. And certainly the little girl, she survived, by the way. Catch that on the Monday show if you remember. But even Mr. Novak, that's someone who was lost to us while on the phone. And it's tough for 911 dispatchers. And just for empathy for everybody, it's tough for this police officer who had to go to this home invasion call. All of a sudden, it turns into a robbery. It turns into assault with a deadly weapon. It turns into a murder. It turns into a pursuit. I mean, his day went from 0 to 60 there. And of course, then he's got to get out on the road and make split-second decisions about whether this suspect lives or dies, surrounded by the people he's sworn to protect. He has no good backstop. And yet the guy, the suspect there, he doesn't care. He'll take out anybody. He just killed Novak. He'll kill the police officer. He'll kill anybody driving by. And so I feel bad for the police officers who have to make such terrible and stressful decisions. And I'm sure that affects them too.
2 or 3 critical situations within one critical situation. When you think about it, I mean, the initial officer tried to prevent the guy from leaving. It led to a high-speed chase, or even a medium-speed chase, however you want to frame it. But that gets everybody's adrenaline going. That gets the dispatcher's adrenaline going even also, because they quite often feel responsible for the safety of the officers, even though, the officers have to take the rest of the responsibility. And then what happens when, a murder suspect is jumping out of a car and you're putting your car in park? I mean, you kind of know what's about to happen one way or actually, you don't know what's going to happen one way or another. And you've got, less than a half a second to decide how you're going to handle it. Are you going on the offensive? Are you going on the defensive? Are you just going to run at this guy? Is he going to lay down? Is he going to run into traffic? Are you going to have to foot pursue him and try to dodge vehicles? Every bullet that comes out of your firearm is subject to liability. So if it goes through, if he ducks and it goes through his window and goes through the windshield of somebody driving through that intersection, it's on you for the rest of your life. Whether you're civilly liable for it, that's a matter for the courts, but that's going to be on you. So there's a lot of stress and tension involved in something like this, and we were able to sum it up in 34 minutes, but this is a lifetime that a lot of these officers and a lot of these dispatchers have lived, just in this one incident alone. And I think it's just kind of cheap of some people in the country to just assume that that the cops are out here just eating donuts and worthless and are ruthless killers that select only who they want to kill, and which is exactly why we do the show that we do, John.
It was always difficult to be a police officer because life and death decisions like this go back to the beginning of policing. It goes back to Boston in 1830 or whatever it was. But it's even different. It's even more difficult in modern America because you'll have police officers who are involved in situations like this where have no choice, where based off of the totality of the circumstances, the reasonableness of the situation they're in, the training that they have as police officers, and we call them to respond to this. And then they'll have an officer involved shooting, which changes their entire lives. It changes their families' lives. They fall under suspicion. What's going to happen? Did I do the right thing? Maybe they doubt themselves. The police department's got to look at them. A civilian oversight board looks at them, and then they could possibly be facing charges. And this happens even in cases where it's ridiculous, where it's clear that the police officer didn't do anything wrong, but because there's political hay to make out of it, particularly in a post-George Floyd era, we've seen this. Ben Darby is my favorite example. I know that on this show, you can just take a shot every time I mention Ben Darby. But how often has it been that police officers will be cleared of murders, cleared of shootings, and then down the road, because there's no statute of limitations, they're facing possible indictments and things like that. It's something that's been going on a lot. We covered a case this past May where a police officer was involved in something, and they're facing indictment for that now.
By the time you're watching this, you should go back a couple days and watch the reboot of that Mantua Township, New Jersey episode, And let me let you in on a little secret. We played that episode to kind of refresh everybody about what happened in that incident. The cop was indicted 20 months after he was cleared by, the local DA and everything else in his department. And he'd been promoted. He was officer of the year. He'd been promoted and everything else. So I wanted you all to get a flavor of that case. Then, obviously we have this that you're seeing tonight. Thank you for being here. Next Tuesday, we hope to bring you somebody very close to that Mantua Township case that can speak on exactly what John was just talking about. The ripple effect this has on an entire generation in a family. Because that guy that was indicted is a new husband, he's a new father, and he's without a job, and he's got this indictment looming over his head. And everybody said this was a clean shooting to begin with, but somebody saw an opportunity, put it in front of the grand jury, and convinced people otherwise. So now he has to wait for the trial to determine whether he's going to do 10 years in prison or if he's going to be able to get back on the street, do what he's trained to do to put food on the table for his new baby and his new wife. So I encourage you to go back to watch what we put out Tuesday, and then next Tuesday, because
new episode.
Yeah.
Yes, because Thanksgiving's a Thursday and we're not going to have an episode of
Right.
Thanksgiving. So next week's new episode is on Tuesday. It's on
On
Tuesday night
Tuesday.
instead of Thursday, which means, of course, there'll be no after show because on Tuesdays I'm at work. So
There's no after show.
there won't be an after show on Thanksgiving either.
There
because
may
I'll
be an after show on Tuesday night. I'll just
Drew will do an
there-
after show.
There may be a special guest host. I won't name,
A special unknown guest host.
yeah, an unknown guest host. We'll figure it out.
I do have
Maybe.
a voicemail if you wanted me to play that.
I would love that.
Guess who it's from?
Our main man, our day
Hey,
one.
John and Drew, this is Jim from Florida. I'm a little bit behind on your episodes, but I
Catch
just
up.
want to give a quick shout out to the excellent commentary regarding the suicide by cop situation that John and his fellow dispatcher had to handle. What impresses me is the attention to detail and catching those small, little inconsistent people that obviously, and you pointed it out rightly, was that probably saved a couple lives that night. Maybe not only their physical life, but also their mental health. Because the worst thing that can happen to a cop is when they're forced to do something that otherwise could have been handled in a much easier way, i.e., the suicide by cop, and these cops got to live with that for the remainder of their lives, and that's not fair. Not only affects them, it affects their families, and obviously it affects dispatchers that have to deal with it because they sent them there, and they're just trying to do their jobs. Anyway, good job, fellas. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Jim. We appreciate you. I want to say that the great job done was actually done by my trainee dispatcher. I don't want any credit for something that I didn't necessarily do, although I was part of the team that was putting together all of the intelligence that night, and I was kind of the first one, I guess, to suspect that something was for sure wrong. But it was based off of actions that she took, and the reason why she took those actions was because as a dispatcher, she's still very new. And she's not complacent at all. I think that's maybe something that got left out of the discussion was she just pursued every avenue of investigation that she could over the phone for this, unusual request and this unusual pattern of behavior, to the point where she's asking the guy who's asking for help, what do you look like? What is your physical description? And then once he's saying no, the red lights went off very brightly, warning flags there. So it was because she wasn't complacent, and I even told my boss too that she has an edge, being new, that she hasn't grown complacent yet. And so because of things like that, and just our ability to work together as a team, even though we're not certified law enforcement officers, we can identify and diffuse serious and dangerous situations, like you said, not just people's lives, but their mental health too. So we may have preserved a couple lives there, possibly more, but also, yeah, the mental health and the career longevity of whichever police officer would have had to respond to the scene. So I'm extremely pleased by her, and I told my boss that.
She's a product of your training, so you're allowed to take that compliment as well. But think of these officers that just refuse to see what you just said. That the non-sworn people are that's who's going to save you. Like, we can, as cops, we can kick doors in and point guns at people and do what we have to do to physically, assist our brothers and sisters. The people with the 10,000 foot view, if you listen to them, they're not going to steer you wrong. And, it's just, it's the dispatchers who are handling or telecommunicators, however you want to frame them, who are handling things as they come in, or even like the crime analysts or people watching real-time cameras. And if you put more stock into what they're saying and listen to what they're saying, they're giving you the answers to the test. You've just got to, and that's kind of the point of this show. Listen, this is a team, and this is all about credibility. And for God's sakes, we've overlooked all of that for far too long. And it's time that all 50 states understand that these are first responders. 911 telecommunicators, dispatchers, 911 operators, radio dispatchers, however you want to frame it, they are first responders and should be treated as such. So they're available. So they have the same mental health benefits. They have the same retirement benefits and everything else available to them.
Appreciate that. All right, guys, we will catch you back here on Tuesday for a new show. Again, next week, Tuesday is the new show, not Thursday, because it's Thanksgiving. We wish you all the best. Have a great Thanksgiving, Drew. I hope that you and yours have a good one too. Hope you enjoy getting blasted with methamphetamines and remembering grandma.
Dante Culpepper.